Hi guys, happy Pride Month. I am suffering from allergies right now, so I'm just basically here and queer, but we're going to talk about The Life of Chuck, which I saw just a few minutes ago at the AMC Mystery Movie of this month. I kind of knew that it was going to be this movie because of, the plot description that the AMC gave us. And on top of that, like the runtime and the rating. So I was just like, yeah, it's definitely The Life of Chuck. But let's talk about this movie because it's one of those movies that has been talked about since last year's premiere at the Toronto Film Festival, which it won the People's Choice Award. I will go a little bit deeper into the potential Oscar potential stuff. Bear with me, I'm dealing with allergies. But yeah, so I want to talk about this movie in depth without spoiling it, but also I kind of want to talk about its potential this award season and also just the performances and just what Mike Flanagan is actually cooking. So let's get into The Life of Chuck. So The Life of Chuck is set in 3 acts. We start with the third act where basically Chuck is slowly dying from a brain tumor, which is also kind of communicated earlier in the movie, but also communicated a little bit later in Chuck's entire lifeline. As the third act starts out with these 2 characters played by Chiwetel Ejiofor and Cara Gillian, and they have this romantic relationship with each other, while also the world becoming kind of like a catastrophic kind of world-ending event, as I should say. The world is ending and nobody knows what's happening, and images of Chuck's entire face and body is just appearing everywhere on billboards and projections, and nobody knows who this guy is. On top of that, you have the second act, which is middle-aged Chuck, who is going through a lot of, emotions, as he's an accountant and he has a full life, but he has something that is kind of holding him back. It turns out that he has the power of dancing, which is something that he obtained from his grandmother a long time ago when he was a kid, which leads into the first act of the film, which is dealing with Chuck as a young boy, as he's dealing with a lot of trauma and grief and just heavy emotions of losing a lot of loved ones. So you have all these narratives intertwining with each other in these 3 acts, and the third act starts out, in a typical kind of it's just kind of, a little bit normal, but then eventually you figure out that electricity is falling apart. A lot of these people can't communicate with each other without electricity, and just on top of that, people are just collapsing from the face of the earth. So yeah, this film kind of deals with a lot of trauma, grief, and anger and pain, and just a lot of stuff that happens in life. But on top of that, there's a lot of joy and beauty to, the magic of life, either through what Chuck is, who he actually is, which is basically just the life of dancing, and mathematics. As the film progresses, young Chuck in the first act is kind of angry at, the idea of dealing with math in life. And his grandfather kind of gives him this pep talk about how math connects to everything, how it connects to dance, how it connects to science, philosophy, just everything that is a part of the earth connects with mathematics. And on top of that, we also have a Walt Whitman quote, "I contain multitudes," which is kind of a poetry type of dialogue that is expressed through several, interpretations. It could be either, the big moment of your life, all the things that you've taken from your life, from, your brain. And as you become, older and older, you'll expand more of your knowledge and also just the people around you. And I think that's the main message of this film, is that you take all these, scenarios in your life, these types of main characters or side characters in your life, and they help you kind of grow as a person. So I think this is a really interesting kind of take on the idea of just life in general. It's a pretty plain and straightforward take on it, as it tries to play with a lot of sappy moments with Chuck's life, while also playing with the audience's emotions with the sappiness, and it kind of worked for me. I did have moments where I kind of felt, a little bit in the moment, but I think for, general audiences who are looking for something that is kind of sappy and kind of pulls on your heartstrings, this is the one. This is actually the one. But I think some people might be a little bit frustrated with how the act structures go, and also just how sappy it gets. It kind of pulls too much of your heartstrings sometimes. But for me, I think it was very genuine. in a kind of cool way, because I think Mike Flanagan, he has kind of like built a career as a person who knows and understands Stephen King's works. This is based on a Stephen King short story of the life of Chuck. And this is another Mike Flanagan joint where basically he's taking a Stephen King adaptation and he's playing it a lot with his own sensibilities. There's a lot of monologues. He's really well known with big, heavy monologues that go on and on and on. And I think here it totally works, while, his other series sometimes like pull too much of like the big monologues, like Midnight Mass and the Haunting series, the miniseries on Netflix. But here I really enjoyed his screenplay. It was very like meticulous, dense, and there was a lot of great lines and just lines and lines and lines of dialogue. And on top of that, I think Tom Hiddleston does some really good work here, although he does appear 30 minutes into the movie. And by then, it's not really his movie. It's more of the other people around him, basically. And also on top of that, just like the younger self of him, which is like Jacob Tremblay, Benjamin Pajak, and Cody Flanagan, who are also young Chuck. And then you have other characters like Mark Hamill, who plays Chuck's grandfather, and he has a really good scene that has like a really great monologue about mathematics. And on top of that, Matthew Lillard shows up in the beginning of the movie, kind of explaining his emotions and what's going on with the world ending. But there's also other characters that you see from other Mike Flanagan joints. So if you're really into like Mike Flanagan's work, you'll know like, oh, that's that person. But yeah, I think this movie is pretty good. It's pretty good. It's one of those films that really pulls your heartstrings. I think it was very genuine. I thought it totally worked. And I thought actually, as I think about it more with like the act structures, it totally works. And it makes like the film kind of feel a bit different from, the other rest of these like sappy films that you see on the Hallmark Channel, or just like other, sappy films in general, where they'll just be like, oh, we're just gonna like pull way too hard on the heartstrings, and here's the moment where you're gonna cry, and here's the moment you're gonna laugh. But no, I feel like this is like very genuine and comes from the heart. And I think Mike Flanagan did a really good job with this film. It's basically his own Green Mile, if I say. But yeah, I give this a 4 out of 5. The more I think about it, I think it's like a really great movie. There's some problems like in the middle section where I was just like, I don't know where this is going, especially with the whole idea of like dance taking over the middle section of the film. But that actually kind of like falls into the first act of the film where, something happens and dance becomes a part of Chuck's life. And yeah, I think this is really good. So let's actually talk about the awards potential here, because I do think The Life of Chuck does have a little small potential. So let's kind of like clarify what's going on here. So this won the People's Choice Award last year, and usually the People's Choice Award has a really good kind of predictor for this award season. Although I think now, since The Life of Chuck is coming out here in June compared to last year, it might have some trouble, picking up some steam during the fall festival season where, other films are going to premiere. And on top of that, it's going to kind of like struggle with other films that, appear during the summer, especially One Battle After Another. But yeah, I don't know. Like, I feel like The Life of Chuck has a better chance with Best Adapted Screenplay and maybe Best Supporting Actor for Mark Hamill. Even though he does have one big, great monologue scene in the middle of the film, I do think his character does have a lot of depth and a lot of emotions for, the limited screen time that he has. But other than that, I feel like this film is going to be like left out of the award season this year. I don't really see it go any farther as far as, Golden Globes, any of like the big critics groups. I feel like this is going to be kind of like left in the dust. Excuse me, my allergies are just fucking me up right now. But yeah, I do think this film is really good. Definitely check it out. Don't skip on it. And, just enjoy life as the world is ending. So yeah, thank you guys so much. Another video coming out pretty soon. It's probably going to be Phoenician Scheme, the new Wes Anderson movie. But yeah, this was pretty good. Hope you guys enjoyed this little quick review. Peace out.